Hello and welcome back everyone to the last session of the day. So this afternoon we're going to run an oral poster session. You're probably wondering what that is. I don't really know. I made it up when we were looking for something to do this afternoon. But we're going to run our oral poster session and then Sean's going to give us a wrap up after that, and then we have our drinks down at Steamworks. One of the themes of today was young and emerging leaders and the frontiers of our industry. And we were, like the session I filled this morning, we were going to talk about that a little bit, but of course our speakers couldn't make it. So the disparate people who we have on this panel do have a theme between them, and they're all able to talk about young people and humans. And I've charged myself with talking about the human factors in our industry, which some people find bizarre and amusing. But nevertheless, I'm going to give it a crack. Now, we don't have long, we only have half an hour. Each person will probably speak for a few minutes, and then I'll be encouraging them to speak to each other and for you to speak to them as well. And so please feel free to interject. Get going? All right, so firstly, I'd like to go to Brigitte, because Brigitte is not relatively old. Can I say that, Brigitte? But the interesting thing about Brigitte is she's been on both sides of the fence in our industry. So she's been in roles which have been trying to sell us technology, and she's worked in a major resource company, still does, trying to bring the technology in and getting it adopted. So I would just like to ask Brigitte to reflect on her experiences, good or bad, doing that on both sides of the fence, and not to scare off all of the younger people in the audience.
That was on that introduction. So yes, as Dave said, I've worked on both sides. So I've been an explorer. I came out of geothermal originally. And then I've also worked in tech startups and as a vendor. And now I'm in this role within Anglo for the past 7 years as essentially an SME in spectroscopy and remote sensing. And I thought what I would throw out today to people is this is a little bit of an oldie but a goodie. It's a very helpful construct, which is the hype curve. Have people heard of the hype curve? Is this something that people know about? So we're going to do some geo charades here. The hype curve basically looks like this. And the idea here is that you can talk about technology and innovation. Actually, you can talk about anything with a hype curve. But the idea is that initially there's something that happens, it's a trigger, you skyrocket up to Mount Hype, and everybody is excited and it's fizzy and amazing. And then what goes up must come down, and you rocket down into the trough of disillusionment, it's called. And then you slowly march back up into an adoption platform. And I would argue that I've kind of lived on both sides of those. I've been part of many hype curves. We're sort of experiencing a big global one right now around AI. There's obviously different pieces of AI. And so I would say as a vendor, you live in that early part of the hype curve. You drive the hype curve. You're trying to get everybody excited. And I don't want to make it sound like a bad thing. My colleague Martin, he kind of, was talking about snake oil. And I do think that you need the hype. We're creative, connected entities, right? We need to be excited. We need to be interested in new ideas. We need to unearth that amongst all of us. So I do think you kind of need that hype. But eventually now, if you look at my current role, I can't live in the hype. I have to try to see past it. Anglo has charged me with looking at what does, well, one, helping to predict the disillusionment. What does that look like and how do we get through it? And also, but ultimately the strategy, 5-year, 10-year, what does good look like? What does that platform of operational stability look like? And so I have to live there, but I still love the hype. But what I would charge everybody here to think about is, where are you on the hype curve? What's your pet thing that you're thinking about? And where is it? Be honest with yourself. Are you in that fizzy, tasty, sugar hit part of some new technology? That's great. It's exciting. It brings up new ideas. But eventually you do have to remember, like, it's going to come back down. Now, where does it come back down? So my second comment is around eventually you know, when we talk about innovation, and so then this last piece that you've asked me to talk about, bringing new technology into a giant mining company. My talk last year kind of touched on that. I think I referred to it as the agony and the ecstasy of bringing new tech into a mining company. So there's two pieces. There's implementation, and that speaks to everybody, very importantly, bringing up, you have to have a good question. You can't just say, I've got a new tool, let's find a problem for it. It's got to be a specific question. And if you don't have that, then that implementation piece, you're just banging your head against a wall. And you may eventually push it through from sheer motivation, but it's going to be painful. But the final piece is more about, in terms of bringing it in, you have to demonstrate value. And so there's two kinds of value, right? There's sort of the more arm-wavy value, well, it's value for society, or it's value for the development of innovation in general, or this particular science. But of course, it all comes down to the hard bit around money. I have to show that there is value to this particular technique or way of doing things. And so I'm going to talk about, the final thing then I'll throw out is then I'll talk about a second kind of curve. And that's a curve where we look at time again on the x-axis, but we talk about money on the y, and OpEx versus CapEx. And since we're all in a love affair with oil and gas today, we can think about how they see that and how we have a lot of overlap between our two industries. But one huge difference is this OpEx versus CapEx. An oil company has an astronomical CapEx at the beginning of a development. We spend a lot of money too, but not that kind of money. They would argue that setting in the absolute best scientific, geoscientific engineering basis at the beginning of a project, which includes things like drilling 60, 70, $100 million wells, that then sets you up for solid fundamentals for the life of the project, and that will, so you have a huge CapEx at the beginning, and then you have a really low constant OpEx for the remainder of the project. Anybody in a big mining company here knows that's not what our curves look like. We do spend money, but it's not as high as an oil company, so we go up, and then we kind of go like this. And you were mentioning one of our co-friends who talked about this sort of spikes of innovation, this sort of sawtooth up and down. And so we may in the end end up spending as much as an oil company, but we spend it different and in a different time period. So I'll leave you with that. Kind of think about those two curves in your company or your department or your business. Where are you in the hype curve? And be honest with yourself, whether you're selling or whether you're buying. And think about that OpEx versus CapEx and how a particular type of technology adds to your actual bottom line and the foundational health of your business or what it is that you're trying to do.
The oil and gas irony is not lost on me at all. But I do think it's a crossing over of technology, which is finally starting to happen and which we need, actually. So, Anne, I'd like to throw to you next. After a long and varied career, latterly as president of the SEG and mentoring a lot of younger geoscientists, how do you see mentoring young geoscientists so that they can really pick up the fundamental skills of our business, which is making the rocks speak at the drill core?
That's a little different, but that's all right. We can deal with that. I was going to start with a little bit about what we've heard today and all the data and the technology and the AI, which is by inference, but not articulated, what we think is knowledge. But we don't get knowledge just from the data, right? We get it from the people. We get it from the self-correcting mechanisms we have. We get it from our scientific institutions. And that critical in that whole loop are the scientific societies, such as the Society of Economic Geologists. And we're independent, and we have a unique view of the whole industry and what's going on in the industry. But training the young economic geologists is a priority for us, and we put a lot of time and effort into that. But we've been asking ourselves a question, because we have this view of the industry, is like, what do we need right now? What do the young people need, and what's missing out there? And I think what we're seeing is we see a lot of the hype, and we talk to people and they'll go like, you don't need the geos, we don't need the geos. We'll get a geo to verify it. We'll get a geo, we'll check. Well, who is that geo? And where were they trained, and what do they know, and what rocks have they seen? And we still need those people, and they're still fundamental into this whole conversation, right? The rocks and visually seeing the rocks is still fundamental. So we got together several of our major companies, industry sponsors, and we talked together last year. And the thing that came up over and over again is drill core logging. So again, we've talked a lot again today about scanners and what they can do for us, and they can do all this great stuff. The young, early career geoscientists are not taught drill core logging at university. If they're lucky, they might go to a major where they're mentored, but unlikely. Like, that still is a kind of a hit and miss sort of operation. So how can we give them the kind of training they need? And we see this over and over again. Our experts who go around the world consulting walk into a drill core shed, find a geo who's just is lost. And maybe they're getting this data given to them, or maybe they're not, or maybe they're sitting in front of a screen, but they don't look at the rocks. Like, all this stuff is vital to the future of our industry, to the future, we can wave our arms and do the values thing, human society, mineral security, all of these things. So how do they learn how the structure fits, how the hyperspectral stuff fits? So despite all of the expanding training and all these things that are happening, you know, where's the next generation of young geoscientists that need to be mentored coming from? It's not North America. It's not going to be even necessarily Australia or the UK, where we pull our hair out about loss of geoscience. It's going to be from South America. It's going to be from Africa and Indonesia and China and everywhere else in the world. So how can we do that? And data alone is not going to solve the problem, because the knowledge is created through the use, the feedback, and the shared standards. So what are we doing now? And what is the industry doing? The industry can't even clearly articulate to us, as a Society of Economic Geologists, what actual skills and knowledge we need. Because you don't even really can't articulate what ore body knowledge is. And we don't have standards, and we don't understand how we're judging what that is. So until we can all work together in a more open, transparent way, we're not going to solve some of these real problems. And on top of that, we add our geopolitical funding and pressures and tensions and the constraints on collaboration. And the only way we can, you know, expand a shrinking pool of geoscientists is by all of us, you know, co-generating, strengthening partnerships, working across industry, academia, societies, and being much more transparent, such that we can, and we do have ideas of how to train and mentor those young geoscientists, and we can get into those, but I'll leave it there. We're going to solve this problem, but we are going to solve it with humans, and we're going to solve it with good geological skills.
It's a human version of that famous business book, Crossing the Chasm. How do we cross the chasm with our young geoscientists? Sort of on the same theme. So, Andrew, now latterly with your involvement or re-involvement with the Global Mining Guidelines Group, the GMG, you have a problem attracting interest from geoscientists to influence what the GMG is doing. This is an unbelievably related conversation. So do you want to talk about that? And I think you might have a plea for the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be a question to the audience. How many people here can just put up your hand if you've heard of the Global Mining Guidelines Group? Okay, so there's some here, which is good because it actually, you know, started here in Canada. So I was hoping there'd be someone in the audience that would know. So the problem that GMG sort of, I guess, was formed, and I was there at the beginning. It was actually in a meeting room just around the corner at a tech office that we all got together and we said, we've got to do things differently. Many of us were part of a group called the Surface Mining Association for Research and Technology, the SMART group. We thought we were awfully smart, but we were an operator only. We're a mining company only forum. And we had some great conversations, and it was a way for us to come together and talk about the challenges that we were all having. But there was this emergence of data-rich capability that was starting to come into our mining operations. You know, we already had a lot of data and we're working with a lot of things in the exploration side, but in the mining side, it was actually quite challenging. And so it was actually the onboard data challenge that we all all went to all of the OEMs and tried to beat them up to release the data to us. And, they smiled and nodded and said, nice things and sent us on our way after giving us cups of tea and coffee and tea and biscuits. So, but nothing really changed. So what that actually told us is that we needed to have multi-stakeholders around the table as equals to have key conversations and try and challenge each other on how can we change the environment, and essentially the whole idea of lifting all boats of the industry. Because we all know if something happens, and we've just had some unfortunate reality or incidences in the last 6 months that have unfortunately been, we've lost lives and so forth. The ripple effects are being felt now, and everywhere that something bad happens, we get the ripple effects. So we've all got to work together to sort of raise all boats and sort of protect ourselves, but also to try and solve these problems that not one company or one type of company can actually solve. So my plea, back to Dave's point, is that and we've got, just to paint the picture, the most people that turn up at and are involved in the conversations have been operational people, have been people from mine sites, have been also people from corporate trying to justify business cases to overcome the hype curve or to deal with technology implementations. A lot of the guidelines are actually focused around helping companies implement new technologies, because we're all struggling with that challenge. So, but recently it's become quite evident, especially with the growth of these tools that we're starting to see, and it's been fantastic listening to some of the stories and some of the technologies and some of the applications of the technologies here today. We're starting to see more of this, but it's actually going back to the fundamental questions. And so one fundamental question is, what is all body knowledge? And there is actually varying explanations or people's perceptions of that. So there's and the way that GMGs works is that we only work on things that come from the community. So come from discussions. And so there was actually a fantastic conversation between a group of geologists and geoscientists, and they were saying, we've got to do something about this and get to your point around developing some standards or at least some guidance around, or even a nomenclature or even coming up with a standard definition maybe. So we're working on this project to define all body knowledge as a community, as an industry, and so that was my plea to David, is that when I look across all of the participants in all of the working groups and all of the projects, yes, there are some geoscientists, but not enough, in my opinion, and especially around this key topic. So GMG needs you. So please get involved, reach out to me. There's a way to get on the website. And please I do encourage you to get involved in the conversation. We're going to start out with authoring a white paper, and then that could end up as a guideline. And it might even, we're a liaison organisation with most of the standards organisations, and our guidelines act as seed documents into those standards conversations. So it is a way to get this topic onto the agenda of the standards organisations. So with that, I want to say thank you, but I just want to add one point to, you made the plea to, or any advice to any young people. One of the things I read this and actually had the wonderful chance of meeting Bob Johansen, who wrote a book about full spectrum thinking. And when I was talking to him, he made a comment around, until you're 50, you should be trying as many types of jobs, working for as many types of companies as you possibly can. Because it's not until you actually reach a great age of 50 that you actually know what you want to do, know the people that you want to work with. And the other one I read an article recently that you're not the happiest until you're in between, or the happiest time in your life is between 60 and 80. Right, so keep that in mind. So, so it's a great journey, and so I do welcome. But please get involved with GMG. Thank you very much.
So that's the reason I'm abnormally happy lately, is it? But the important point there is, you want something to happen, get a seat at the table. Otherwise, nothing will happen. We're a member of the GMG, and the white papers that get written are really good, actually. And there's one on the AI and mining and guidelines around using it and things like that. So having a seat at the table segues into Martin and what we want to talk about. I often think that geologists own the balance sheets of all of the mining companies. We control the balance sheet. If you came into industry from the outside, you'd think we're a bunch of brainless nutcases, really. And we don't get the respect for what we do for the mining companies. And I would say, why is that? And I've had some discussions with Martin and with Sean as well around why don't we have an equivalent of a Top Gun school? Like it's not a technical degree, a business type degree that better prepares geoscientists to take executive level C-suite jobs in the mining companies, because after all, mining is about the rocks, and we know about the rocks and we own the balance sheet. So Martin, would you like to give some of your reflections on that topic, please?
Yeah, thanks. First, I'd like to thank IMDEX for the promotion. I'm not sure. I thought John was on leave, but clearly he isn't. So thanks for that.
Fine. I'll send it to him.
I took a picture. I'm going to send it to him now. So yeah, to tie into what Dave said, I don't want to talk too long about it, but around geoscience leadership and communication, it's something that I see is lacking. And if you think about, you take your legend explorer that you can think about the last 30, 40 years, you can think about any one of them. You know, you heard them, you heard their stories, you could find information about them on the internet. They wrote books. You know, they were influential, they were energetic, they were charismatic people. We don't hear those stories anymore. Where are those people? I mean, we can look at ourselves. You know, why aren't we doing those things? And on the mining side, it's even more disappointing. I mean, by a show of hands, who knows how many of the top 20 mining companies have a geologist as a CEO? Okay, the answer is zero.
Zero,
Yeah, there was one, we just lost him. Bristow just left. That was the one. And yeah. So it's a shame. So you start asking yourself, well, yeah, like you said, we're custodians of the rocks. We understand them. We own them. We are systems thinkers. We see the rock going from the start all the way through to final product. And, you know, to be honest, I sit in meetings with mining engineers and miners, and they don't see that. They try and optimize, but it's not a system optimization. It's absolutely just in silos. So we're the people that can translate that message, but we're not in those positions to do it. And you could say, well, why is that? So I've had a bit of a think about it. So, you know, one, personality. Yeah, we are a strange personality type. We like to lick rocks and be out in the field and stay in tents. So maybe it's our personalities that make us not want to be leaders. Could be that. The work itself, obviously, we want to be in the pit, or we want to be in the bush. That's the work. So, you know, being in a boardroom, maybe that's boring. Education, if I look at the people that were influential in my education, they're academics. They also want to be in the bush. They also want to grow a beard and wear hats. So, you know, that's not always in a boardroom environment. That's not always seen as the best representation. No offense to anybody. And then the way we communicate. I mean, you could just sit through, and I know this is the technical talk, but you can just see by the amount of technical talk happening to transfer that message. And I think someone answered that, you know, Tyler, it was you. You know, when you go to someone else for investment, you completely change your language. And unfortunately, not all geologists do that in a work environment. They get into meetings and they have to explain value, and it's all about graphs and, you know, lines on a squiggly thing, and the message doesn't get across. Yeah, so we have to look at our language that we speak as well. We should be speaking, you know, we should be speaking the business language, money, value. That's what we should be speaking, and that's lacking. And I don't know where that education is going to come from. So, you know, we always need geologists to be in that environment, sitting in the dark room, looking at thin sections and doing the detailed work. But we need to enable that. We need geologists to get up and take leadership positions to communicate the value of those people. So it's something, and I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'm quite keen to do something about it, to get some type of, I don't know, geology MBA or something like that, where we teach geologists who want to stick up their hands and say, I want to be a leader in the industry and speak for the other geologists that want to sit in the back room with their beards. I'll be there.
We will be coming to Anglo asking for $1 million a year to fund this school, by the way.
Some of us don't want beards.
Yeah, thank you, Martin.
Sure.
So we have some time. So if anyone wants to ask anyone a question about virtually anything, are you free to have a go? Because if you don't, I'm going to ask them a really difficult question.
Can I make a comment or ask Martin? So maybe to your point, I think the other piece is that in a corporate environment particularly, it's quite politically charged, right? There's a lot of, maneuvering, and most of us technically, we kind of shy away from that. So I think so with your MBA or with your Top Gun, I like the Top Gun political astuteness or political battle preparedness or something like that should be part of the curriculum.
I saw a hand before. Yep.
Hi. My question is for Brigitte. You talked about the hype curve, and it's very interesting. You were in different phases, but then you talked about stability. What does that look like then with AI and ML and everything that's happening right now?
I am probably not the person to talk about AI, but I can say in my particular remit at Anglo is remote sensing and spectroscopy. So maybe I could talk about that, but it echoes across into other disciplines, of course. What looks good is actual use of the data for its intended purpose, at least initially. So there's that initial question that gets asked and it answers. Brigitte, I have a clay problem, or my pit wall is falling down. Is there something I can do to understand rock strength better? So you answer that initial question, but to me, long-term stability is that then they take that and run with it, and they use it for other applications. And that shows real health of a particular innovation or discipline, that they take it beyond that initial first answer. You need that first success? Yes, okay, great. That tool told me where my clay was, whatever. I'm being very simplistic. But then they take that tool and start placing it in other places. And that then shows that technology has life. It's gotten out of Thunderdome, it's made it out, and it's now going to be used across the business and sort of metastasized throughout the business. So that's what good looks like to me, is that I'm not in the equation anymore. I'm just the SME who introduced it and helped get it in there, and then they take it and run. Because if I keep having to come back every year, it's not actually implemented. It's not real. It's not real until the mine manager personally asks for it.
Can I add some comments?
Sure.
So the other piece to look at it as well is often mining companies look for other mining companies doing that thing or implementing that piece of technology, or they don't want to be the only ones in many cases. And there's companies that actually quite openly say, we don't want to be first, we want to be second, third, or we'll pick it up once it's a robust product. So that sort of plateau to stability or to implementation is actually more than one company. And so when I was with the innovation function at BHP, we had a library of technologies that we had paid for, but they were stranded. We were the only ones using it, and if the site, to Brigitte's point, didn't like it, new mine manager said, well, we're not doing that, then that's stranded technology. So we deliberately tried to, and this was going against all the antibodies, by the way, of the organisation, to actually try and create a opportunity to attract more customers, more mining companies to pick up a technology. And the other piece we knew is that we may back away from that investment. And so we actually needed multiple mining companies to actually pick up that investment. Because we've also got lots of stories where companies of especially multi-year technologies that need long lead times to develop, we go and change and we end up. So to me, that coming out of that trough of disillusionment is a technology and a company has multiple customers, ideally also in multiple industries. That's actually really robust. cost sort of plateau. And so, companies who are the ones that aren't super innovative, they can see that there's lots of examples that they can go and visit and see the technology in use and so forth. So with the AI revolution that we're going through, that's why it's super exciting, because I think there isn't one industry that isn't touched by this technology. So that's why I think the point that Brigitte made around the oil and gas love affair that we've had today, or elements of it, is actually a positive thing. So, but we don't have to just look at oil and gas. There's many other industries that we can go and look at. So.
All right, 3 more minutes. Any other comments in the panel or questions from the floor?
So it's a quick comment. In the light of the dearth of geologists, CEOs of big companies, there is another one that's worth mentioning, and that's Mick McMullen, who recently sold Mac Copper in Australia to Harmony Gold in South Africa for $1 billion. Before that, he was the CEO of Kirkland Lake, which did very well, and before that, he was the CEO of Stillwater Mining, which he sold to another South African company. And before that, his private money was 50% of the private money that found Saddle North in British Columbia. So that's another good but rare role model of a geologist.
I was going to say that part of the solution to getting leaders in our business in general and in geology is that human part that I was alluding to before, and it's communication skills. And so it's not necessarily about giving them MBAs or giving them the financial skills, because we have lots of geos who go off the financial path. They can navigate that, they do it, they excel. It doesn't mean they come back and lead companies, but we really need to work hard on the skills that Tyler already obviously has, and maybe that's part of a Stanford education, right? Some of us are lucky that we've been in those institutions and had that education. But that's really something that like an SEG can do, and it's something that companies can do to value communication skills at all levels.
Sorry, Dave, just a different comment on implementation of technology, and that's something Brigitte and I worked a lot on implementing new technology. And one thing I found is it's less about the technology and more about the workflow changing. I think that's where it usually falls apart. So you can push that technology, but if we don't understand what part of the workflow is now going to be stopped to slot this technology in, it failed. And I think, in the AI space, it's probably the same. You say, okay, well, you're doing this exploration for us and targeting, but, we've got generative geologists. What are they going to do? So how do we use both? So I guess it's one of those, the people readiness, you can measure all the things, but I think for AI, the people readiness is limited. And so those are the 2 comments: people readiness for the technology, and then also the workflow, because that's what we found is you have to get there with the technology and the new workflow. Otherwise it's not going to work.
All right, we'll have to stop it there. That's been the half hour. I'll make one reference to a famous geologist, one of these people that people looked up to for years, was Haddon King. And he wrote the book, The Rocks Speak, which is a quote that I love. It's a favourite. It's absolutely a favourite, yeah. I'd just like to thank our panellists. And see, it worked fine in the end.